to have an opportunity to begin thinking about the ways that we need to think a little bit differently about our work in education, and have an opportunity to hear a person who's been thinking very deeply about how we can think differently about education, K-12 education and education reform, but by way of using the things that we're already doing that are really important edges, give us an important advantage as we think about future directions and new directions that we want to go in education. My name is Francisco Rios. I'm the Dean of the College of Education. This is the second of a series of lectures that we've done, that we've held here in the college, looking at educational innovation and educational reform. We had last year a person by the name of Barnett Berry came right up actually at the same time in January last year, and he had written a book called Teaching 2025, and he was talking about how he envisioned the teaching profession be a little bit different as a result of, again, important changes that are already occurring today, but that really could advance the work that we're doing in education. So I had the opportunity to hear Milton Chen speak last year, February, and I thought he would be a great second speaker to come and share with us his ideas around educational reform. But I'm going to actually turn this over to Karen Holscher, Dr. Karen Holscher, who's going to make the introduction. You know, one of the things that I've really come to appreciate is that, you know, an event like this requires a lot of energy and effort and a lot of logistics and bringing a lot of, coordinating a lot of things. Fortunately, they took that out of my hands, right? Because if not, you might not have even known that this event was going to happen, right? And it would have been Milton and I having a lot of lemonade and cookies. But she really has taken this opportunity to really bring to us in a variety of formats, in a variety of ways, this opportunity to hear what Milton Chen has to say around Education Nation and the 6 leading edges of innovation that we can move forward. So not only do I want to introduce Karen Holscher, Dr. Karen Holscher, but I want you to also join me in thanking her for making this event happen. So, yeah. Dr. Karen Holscher.
Thanks, Francisco. Thanks, Francisco, and thanks everyone for choosing to be here today when you could either be studying for midterms, grading midterms, or maybe watching Star Wars videos online. Well, it's all true what you've read and heard about Milton Chen. He lives in San Francisco, and he cheers for the 49ers.
Sorry. Well, you won. Come on.
He earned a bachelor's degree in social studies at Harvard College, and then on this left coast, he earned master's and doctorate degrees in communications research at Stanford University. Both sides of his brain, active they are. Milton later taught at Harvard's Graduate School of Education, where I had the good fortune to meet and work with him as a graduate student and research assistant. This was right around the time Steve Jobs announced a new Apple computer called the Macintosh, a machine that celebrated its 30th birthday yesterday. And it's also true about Milton, and this is why many of you are here, that Milton knows Big Bird and the Muppets personally. He's been associated for decades with research and development for Sesame Workshop in New York, and currently serves as a trustee of the group. Milton was founding director of the KQED PBS Center for Education in San Francisco, and for the past decade has been executive director of the George Lucas Educational Foundation, a nonprofit group in the San Francisco Bay Area, famous not for producing Star Wars movies, but for creating and sharing multimedia resources for learning and teaching, which you'll hear about today. So, to review, Dr. Chen has bi-coastal academic degrees. He knows Bert, Ernie, and George Lucas personally, and he usually cheers for Colin Kirkpatrick. Excuse me, Kaepernick. I watch him all the time. Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, he's Irish, part Irish.
Yeah, the Irish version. Colin Kaepernick. Milton, now that the 49ers are officially on vacation.
Yes. Yeah, long vacation.
We need you to help us harness the power of the Force and become part of the Seahawks' 12th Jedi Force on Super Bowl Sunday. Now you must unlearn what you have learned. Place the 49ers in the back of your mind. You will.
Okay.
Are you with us on this?
I'm
Yeah,
with you.
all right. Okay, then. Now, knowing what we know about the Force and that many of the truths that we cling to depend on our point of view, we have some special lightsabers for you to carry with you these next few days.
Great.
Knowing that the Sith, I mean the Broncos, will also carry these elegant weapons as well. So I'll get you those right now.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. Does it come with the, yeah. This is great.
Milton Chen, these weapons are your life.
All right.
Use
Thank
them
you.
thoughtfully,
They're the
with
right
the
colors.
deepest commitment, the most serious mind. Closely guard these, never let them fall into the untrained hands as you watch the game, especially the hand of any Denver's Bronco fans. Are we good on this? Is the Force with us?
The Force will be with you. No
All right.
question.
Okay,
No
then.
question.
Please welcome Jedi Master, Dr. Milton Chen.
Thank you, Dean Rios and Professor Holscher. As Dr. Holscher mentioned, we first met each other about 30 years ago at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she did her doctoral work. And all of you who are teachers and students, one of the great relationships in our society is to be able to teach someone. I played a very small role in that with Karen. She was a star student, even back then as a graduate student. But to come back and have a little bit of a reunion with her and her family, it's been a wonderful experience to have someone that you taught go on and to be able to see the way in which they've developed their own career, to be able to see in which they're contributing so much back. It's just a real pleasure for any teacher. So thank you, Karen, for all the work you've done to make the arrangements here these past couple of days. It's been a wonderful pleasure to be here, to learn more about the work here and your leadership here at Woodring. Some fantastic work. I visited a lot of colleges of education around the world, and this one has a very special place in terms of its not only where it is located geographically and the diversity of the Pacific Northwest, the cultures, the history, the languages, the stories that you're telling to students, but also your interest in making social justice part of the curriculum. I know you take that very seriously. We've been talking a lot about, and visiting with some of the faculty here, about how do we make the Common Core, this new reform movement around Common Core standards in the curriculum, how do we make that come alive for students? And you have a lot to contribute to that, to show us all what the Common Core could mean in terms of social justice, in terms of telling the right stories, in terms of STEM and science. So I look forward to hearing your voice in this national conversation about that. I've titled my talk, The Edges of Innovation Moving to the Center. I like to talk about the edges of innovation because they exist today. They exist in many places, and that's what the George Lucas Educational Foundation has done to create a website. It's edutopia.org. I'll be talking about it today. I hope you may have had a chance to see it. I'm just curious how many of you have heard of the George Lucas Educational Foundation or our website, Edutopia. If you could raise your hands. Okay, because it used to be we were fairly unknown if you asked people, and very few hands would go up. But one of the good things we have done is to market our name through NPR. So those of you listening to NPR, you'll sometimes hear our credit that support for NPR is provided by the George Lucas Educational Foundation and our website, edutopia.org. And we're using that as a way of reaching more opinion leaders and the great audience that listens to National Public Radio are looking for new ideas, trying to understand the world, getting great news, non-commercial. So it's been a great resource for us, and coming out of public broadcasting myself, working in public TV and also in public radio, I've just been very pleased to see how the audience for public radio has grown tremendously. It's been one of the real innovations when it comes to public broadcasting. Yesterday I spoke at the middle school, one of the middle schools here in Bellingham. So I know some of you were there yesterday, so I will try to very quickly summarize what I said yesterday in order not to duplicate too much of what people heard. This will be a little bit like a TV show, where I'll just say, last episode, yesterday, this is what happened, and then we'll move on to today. So I'll quickly summarize these slides from yesterday. That here you see a picture of me 30 years ago. Just a few years before we met at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and I hope you can see me there next to that 8-foot-tall yellow canary. We are standing on the Great Wall, and we're producing a program, a co-production between Chinese public television and NBC called Big Bird in China. And I show you this because it marks one part of my career working in children's television and in educational media, working for Sesame Workshop, where I started my career, and then more recently working on the left coast and working for George Lucas's Educational Foundation. Both places, Sesame Street and the Lucas Foundation, really stand for innovation. Really stand for how can we think differently about education. And those of you, I'm so pleased to see some students here, those of you who grew up on Sesame Street, although the first audience for Sesame Street is probably now about 43 or 44. There you go. You were there in 69, and you may remember it. It was very exciting. And this street has traveled around the world. There are international co-productions like this one in China, productions in Latin America and Europe. You can see versions of Sesame Street. Sesamstrasse in Germany, Rue Sésame in France, and again in both China and Japan. And in Latin America, we produced one of the earliest co-productions, was a show called Plaza Sésamo with Televisa in Mexico. And so these programs have been produced to help with early childhood education in those countries. But what we're learning now is that we're trying to bring back some of those productions. So I'm very pleased to tell you that if you watch Univision, you can see Plaza Sésamo. It's a great way to not only learn about cultural issues, early childhood issues in Latin America, but for those of us who want to learn some Spanish, it's a great way to learn some Spanish. So we're bringing back some of these productions. Now we can do it through the internet, through YouTube, and you'll begin to see more of these international co-productions of Sesame here in the US. This little girl, did a great job in this program, and she, of course, was 5 in 1982, so you can do the math. She must be a mother of her own family by now. So this is our website and a homepage from our website, and our website attracts close to 700,000 unique visitors per month now. And in part due to the fact that you can now see video over the internet. I remember a time, I would say it was about 6, 7, 8 years ago, where we were having a meeting and Mr. Lucas said, we should get ready for the day when people will be able to see our films over our website. And when we first put them on, they were about this big and they were a little grainy. Do you remember the first time you saw a video over the internet and how that has totally transformed our experience with sharing information? YouTube is only 8 years old now. It has totally changed the way in which we share information. So that's the heart and soul of what we do at Edutopia, is to make films. It makes a lot of sense for a filmmaker to make films about the most interesting, innovative educational programs in schools and districts. I like what one educator described us as, and he said, I look to you all as an idea factory. Whenever I go on your website, I get new ideas about things that I can do. I sometimes say we want to put the edge back into education. We want to make education more edgy than it is. It's a time to do that. Lots of opportunities now. It's a great time to be an educator, a student, a professor, a teacher, a principal, because now we can truly achieve this goal of all children learning to a much higher level. I maintain we haven't had the tools to do that before. But the digital learning media that are now being developed, and I'll show you some examples, can enable kids to learn things earlier, better, deeper, and maybe faster too. So we're varying the ways in which students can learn and the pace at which they can learn. This is the book I wrote about edges of innovation in our schools, and you'll see that power button right in the middle of the United States, and Hawaii and Alaska are on the back of the book. Sorry about that. But pressing the power button for our country and trying to imagine an education nation where everything that's talked about, for instance, in the State of the Union address last night, I wish the President would sometimes say, we're trying to create more opportunities, more jobs, a stronger economy. I wish he would then say, and this depends on education. Everything that he talks about, when he talks about national security, that depends on the quality of our schools. So this is my vision for an education nation, and the fact that a nation is only as good as its educational system. Last night I referenced the fact that a couple of countries sometimes put images of children learning on their currency. This is part of their cultural identity. When they think about themselves as, this is Taiwan, this is Singapore, and these are what's that, about $10 bill, $15 bill, they actually see images of children learning. I think you're very familiar with the fact that we are not yet an education nation. We still have a very high school dropout rate. This statistic about how of 50 first grade students behind in reading, 44 are still behind at the 4th grade. We don't do a very good job closing that gap through the first 3 or 4 years of school. And today I'm going to show you one example of how digital media can help close this gap, can make learning a more expansive and multimedia experience for students. School community partnerships are an important part of this, and this is the strength of our country. Sometimes we're compared to other countries. We've been talking a lot about Finland and Singapore at the top of the international comparisons, China as well, but they don't have this. They don't have this rich tapestry of museums, libraries, universities who are acting as partners for their schools, companies providing workplace experience for students, libraries, providing digital media experiences for students. I'm working with the national parks. We're trying to get more kids into nature. And we understand that is a very important transformative experience for so many students. In some ways, what I view education about is just broadening people's horizons, just giving them more experiences, more things to be interested in and curious about. That's the most important thing. When people say, what is the purpose of education? That's what I would say. Just opening up all sorts of doors and windows for students to know about things that you hadn't heard about before. Kids today, despite all the digital media and perhaps because of the digital media, are still growing up with very narrow windows on the world. It's amazing. In fact, digital media, the recent report just this week from the Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop showing that kids are spending, again, between 7 and 10 hours a day with digital media. In fact, what they're doing is they are multitasking 10 hours, and this is the average, this is not the extreme, the average of 10 hours of media use a day into 7 hours, clock hours of time, because they're using different media, and you're all doing this as well, multitasking at the same time. They're on the internet, they're texting, they're looking at videos, maybe they're doing some homework. I have a friend who's a technology director for a school district, so she understands this problem. And she goes home and sees her son, who's about 13, sitting in front of the cable TV with his laptop open and his smartphone next to him, and he's occasionally glancing at the screen. He's working on his laptop. He's got several windows open. He's got Facebook open. He's looking at YouTube, and he's texting on a smartphone. And she says to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm doing my homework." She says, "No, you're not. You're looking at cable TV. You're looking at your laptop. I see you're doing Facebook and you're texting." And he just looked at her and said, "Mom, we're in a different era." And that's the era in which we're living in. So actually communicating to students more thoughtful and reflective use of digital media, gaining back some of that 10 hours a day for educational use of media becomes very important. We were talking about this in one of the sessions earlier about, let's have a day when we don't use any digital media. It might seem extreme to many people here, especially the young folks. Could you survive for a day? Could you go on a Facebook fast for a day? If you did that, when you came back, you would have a different attitude towards the tools and the habits that you have. I've worked a lot in television, in educational television, but I still supported, years ago, ideas of TV turnoff week. I worked at the PBS station in San Francisco, and some of my colleagues would say, "Well, why are you supporting that? They're not going to watch us." I just said, just wait. If people turn off the TV for a week or 3 days or a day, when they come back, they will think about how they're using their time, and they might begin to think more about educational uses of what they're doing. I'll quickly summarize this, but I love TED Talks, who doesn't? And there's some great TED Talks, and here's one about It's titled How Social Media Can Make History, but in it, Clay Shirky, who's a futurist at NYU, talks about the time that we're living in and the fact that all the media we've ever created to express ourselves are now right on a smartphone, right next to each other on these devices we're carrying around in our pockets, in our purses. It's an amazing time when you think that you can, this is a phone, this is a camera, you can write on it. Some students actually do their papers, don't they, on these little devices. And I met a taxi driver once who was in college at San Francisco State, and we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, I just sent in my assignment. While I was waiting at the airport to give somebody a ride, I just sent in my assignment to my professor off of this little device. Video, all the different media, images, photography, all that is right next to every other medium right here on these devices. It's an amazing time, and a time that we've invented. So the question becomes, shouldn't education be different? If we can be learning and teaching anytime, anywhere, shouldn't the way in which we look at the school day, the calendar, shouldn't that be different from what was the calendar when, for instance, I went to school 50 years ago? I like this last statistic, that every minute there's 100 hours of video uploaded to YouTube. A couple years ago, the statistic was that every minute, about a day's worth, 24 hours of video was uploaded to YouTube. And just in the last 2 years, that's increased almost, well, fourfold, 100 hours every minute from around the world. And so people say, you know, not everything of those 100 hours every minute is educational, and I say yes, I know that not everything on YouTube is educational. I love the pet tricks, and I love this one. This is an educational video to me. If you own a cat, please take a look at this if you own a cat, because your life just got better. Train your little kitty to use the toilet. So I think we're familiar with learning anytime, any place. That's a concept we understand because information is always on, 24/7, 365. Now what we're looking at is varying the learning path and the learning pace. Can we take you on different learning pathways to get to higher standards? And can we also vary the pace at which people learn? For a long time, we've held the time constant and let learning vary tremendously. The time for a course, the time to take a test. But now we're learning we can, in this new age when content is always on, people can access that content and move through some content more quickly if they're especially interested in it or skilled at it or have background, and some students need more time. So we're varying the pace at which we can all learn. And maybe we can all learn more things at different paces. I talk about the 6 edges of innovation in my book, and here they are. I'll talk a bit more, especially around curriculum assessment and technology. But changing our thinking is the most important thing. How should learning be different now in 2014 from what it was even, in 2004? I sometimes say when it comes to education that 2010 was really the pivotal year. 2010 was, to us at Edutopia, the start of the 21st century in education. That, even though the 21st century started in 2000, we spent 10 years under No Child Left Behind and looking for new answers, looking for innovation. We didn't change the assessments, and therefore we didn't change much of the way in which teaching and learning took place in the classroom. But around 2010, some things began to happen. One was there was a growing recognition that technology could play a role. Believe me, I spent an entire career, more than 30 years, talking about these ideas about how you could use media. I was an early advocate of Ken Burns' Civil War series, more than 20 years ago. When Ken Burns produced that for PBS, all of a sudden everyone said, this is a whole new way of learning about the Civil War. Through the stories of soldiers and their families, we could learn a lot more about what actually happened in this greatest war that we fought. So I've been talking about this for a long time, but we haven't had a way of, in a cost-effective way, providing these tools to allow people access. Now that happened. Around 2010, the iPad to me was a real game changer. So now you see all manner of tablets of different sizes and shapes. but to provide a tablet, a powerful computer for the cost of a textbook. That's what we've been waiting for. We haven't had that. And finally, school districts said, wait a second. Certainly in California, our governor, Governor Schwarzenegger at the time, said, let's move to digital textbooks. The time has come. Why are we spending, and looking at our state budget, and looking at the amount of money spent on textbooks, why are we still spending $175 for one textbook and keeping that textbook for 7 years, when we could provide all the textbooks for that roughly that same cost? About $200 per student per year is the cost of providing iPads, tablets, not just the hardware but the software, the professional development for teachers, and the broadband access. It's getting to be about $200 per student per year. So we reached that point around 2010 and things began to change. I do want to say that what we can now do is educate across these intelligences, these 8 intelligences. And for those of you who are students, we have a great popular feature on our Edutopia website, which is called the Multiple Intelligences Quiz. So just search on Edutopia and MI Quiz and you'll find it. It's about 25 questions that range across your interest in learning through words, learning through pictures, learning with others, the interpersonal intelligence, the intrapersonal intelligence, how reflective you are in knowing yourself. And at the end, it gives you a little profile of yourself across these 8 intelligences. Do you like to spend time in nature? This was the 8th intelligence that Professor Howard Gardner from Harvard added. These are all intelligences. One of the definitions was they have to be located in the brain. And there is a center in the brain for each one of these. And he added that last one at the end. He said there is a center of the brain that is activated when people are in nature. Neuroscience is a very exciting area for research because it's telling us a lot more about how people learn. There's an interesting article from Salon. It's great to be able to just say these things, and those of you who are on Wi-Fi can find them. But look on Salon and look for an article about mobile EEG, a mobile record of our brain waves that people can carry in their backpacks on a laptop. Before, to monitor your brain waves, you had to go in a special lab. They'd attach these electrodes to you. In this little exercise in Scotland, in Edinburgh, they had students walk around and record their brain waves as they walked through the city. And then when they walked into nature, when they walked into one of the city parks, their brain waves changed. They became much more relaxed, less stressful, and that was recorded on the EEG. So neuroscience is giving us a new look into how we respond to different environments, and soon you'll be able to do this. This is happening so quickly. Some of the things that we thought were science fiction, you'll be able to do this. I wouldn't be surprised if you, in your time as students here, if you saw students walking around with little electrodes attached to their brain and a little EEG monitor running on their laptop. So part of changing our thinking is this understanding about our mindsets. How many of you are familiar with this term mindset? It's been given a lot of new energy. Just raise your hands if you are. Yeah, well, good. I won't have to say too much about this. But this is the idea about our expectations about learning for ourselves and for our students. And Carol Dweck at Stanford's talked about this in a book. I think I've got a slide about her website and her book, in which she says we should have a growth mindset for ourselves and for our students. We should believe that all students can learn and learn to high levels, that it's a matter not of native intelligence or background or where you've come from, what you look like. This is a matter of persistence and tenacity, grit, it's been called, ability to overcome setbacks when you're learning or in your personal life. So this has become a very popular book called Mindset, and it applies to all sorts of different situations, including sports. To have a growth mindset for yourself when in sports, that you can get better and better, and the way in which you do that is by exercising your brain in your learning in education. Anyway, it's a great website about mindset, and I just wanted to quickly show you that this research goes back a long ways. This research about how we think about in education are students. And this idea of teacher expectations is very powerful. This line of research goes back, at least 30 or 40 years. And I sometimes have talked about it, but I decided to see what was available online about it. And of course, there's a YouTube video about it. There's a series about, this sinister-looking man is actually a very famous professor of psychology. His name is Philip Zimbardo. He's hosted a number of series about psychology, and you can see them online. But in this little clip, he's talking about our mindsets and the power of teacher expectations. So I just want to show you a little bit of this clip, because he'll describe this Robert Rosenthal's research on the Pygmalion effect. How many of you remember or know of the character, the mythology around Pygmalion? This is probably not as well known. But if you know the movie My Fair Lady, that's based on this story. Remember Rex Harrison trying to teach a young woman in the flower market that he could take her to a party at the ambassador's residence, and she would convince everyone she was a royal person. The way in which she spoke, the way in which she conducted herself. He believed that she could do it. He believed that he could teach her to do it, and that became, that's based on the story of Pygmalion, and that became this film. It was originally a stage play written by George Bernard Shaw. So I'll just, let me just...
That you are a late bloomer, that even though you haven't demonstrated your intellectual ability, you will blossom.
He's talking about how in this study, teachers were told that they had a certain number of students, like 20% of the students, 4th or 5th grade, who were going to be late bloomers that year. They hadn't done well in school, but this is going to be the year. They're going to be in your classrooms in which they will bloom. In fact, these students were selected at random, but it planted the idea in the teacher's mind to have higher expectations for these students.
Or you're not a good student, or you're a good student. Psychologist Robert Rosenthal and school principal Lenore Jacobson did a remarkable study some years ago in which they told school teachers, elementary school teachers, that on the basis of some psychological tests, some of their students, some of the children in their class were designated as late bloomers. Even though they hadn't shown any academic success, they are expected to bloom. The amazing thing is that in a very short time, the teachers began to treat those children differently than the other kids. Those kids began to think of themselves differently, and in the end, they actually performed significantly better than the other kids. They were transformed by the teacher's positive expectations, the opposite of Jane Elliott's study, in which teachers' negative expectations that the teacher infused led them to think of themselves as inferior. So let's see the Pygmalion effect in action in these classrooms set up by Rosenthal and Jacobson.
Positive expectations can change a person's perception of a situation just as dramatically as negative expectations. Psychologists call this the Pygmalion effect, after the George Bernard Shaw play of the same name, in which even an uneducated ragamuffin can be transformed into a proper society lady. In an experiment conducted at an elementary school like this one, psychologist Robert Rosenthal and school principal Lenore Jacobson took the Pygmalion effect one step further.
What we wanted to show was the extent to which teachers' expectations could actually affect pupils' intellectual performance, for example, their IQ scores. So what we did was we tested everybody in a school with a test that pretended to be a test that would predict academic blooming, so-called Harvard test of inflected acquisition. And allegedly on the basis of that test, but not really, we gave each of the teachers in the school the names of a handful of children in her classroom that would get smart in the academic year ahead. These kids' names were taken out of a hat. We chose them by means of a table of random numbers. The children themselves did not know in any direct way that teachers were holding certain expectations for them. Teachers were told not to tell the kids, and of course we didn't tell the children either. So the children never knew.
So I think that gives you a taste of this study. And when you think about it, this applies in so many ways to human behavior, and especially the classroom. But for the teachers who felt that these students were going to be the late bloomers, of course, they paid more attention to them. They spent more time with them. If they didn't understand something the first way, they might try a different way of explaining it. They might provide other opportunities and different ways of approaching the content. And by the same token, if they thought a student wasn't going to be doing well, or they had a mindset about that student that was more negative, they would do the opposite. If they didn't get it the first time, they might say they would resign and say, well, they're probably not going to get it anyway, so I'll just give up on those students. So this is a very powerful dynamic, not just in teaching and learning, but also in human behavior. When you think about if you meet a person and you don't think that person likes you very much, well, then you might not spend much time with them. But we have a way through our behaviors, based on our mindset, of making that mindset come true. So now I believe we have all sorts of ways of explaining things in different ways to students to take on some of that activity that the teachers, technology can provide some of the ways in which students are accessing content. So if they didn't understand it verbally, well, maybe they can understand it visually, and we could present it in that way. So I also talked yesterday about trying to create more collaboration amongst teachers, and so pleased to see that there are many ways in which teachers here are collaborating with others. They're being trained to do that through partnerships here at the College of Education. But this is one of the keys, I think, to the future of education, is that teachers should not be the last solo practitioner among the professions. If you look in healthcare, if you look in business, if you look in architecture, certainly if you look in the world of professional sports, it's all about teams. It's teamwork in the office, on the athletic field. It's teamwork in the hospital as well. So teamwork should also be present in schools. And we don't want teachers just to be, as they've been trained traditionally, to go in the classroom and teach on their own. A large part of what we've shown at Edutopia are teachers working together, and working in partnership with each other and with other experts in the community. They could be nurse practitioners, they could be artists, writers, and also architects. I'll show you a little film from the state of Washington. I want to show you some innovation that happened right here nearby, where a teacher did a project in 10th grade geometry to have students design a school of the future. They used geometry that they had learned in that course for the first 20 weeks or so, and then applied it in more of a project-based learning, where they used computer-aided design to design a school of the future, working together in teams, and the teachers worked with architects. So let me show you that one. So you see that the editor's note there that this was done by a teacher named Eva Reeder from Mountain Lake Terrace High School. She has since passed away. So I want to pay homage to Eva because she was a great early project-based learning teacher, and then she became a project-based learning coach, working with other teachers and districts. It's one of our best examples and one of our earliest examples of project-based learning. I made this point yesterday. Another feature of technology has to do with language translation. How many of you have used Google Translate, either for fun or used it to experiment, or maybe in your courses to, it's become incredibly popular. And so one of the things we've done, and you can do this in your YouTube videos as well, is to provide the English language captions of your films. And so we provide that as a file along with this film. And then Google Translate will translate these in real time in up to 60 different languages. I first saw this just about 1.5 years ago. I was astonished. It's one of those moments in our lives using digital media. You say, I'm amazed that we can actually do this. So what I'd like to do is show this film and have one of you who's fluent in another language tell us that language, and you can look at the captions and tell us how accurate they are. Who's fluent in another language? Yesterday we showed it in Spanish, so maybe a different language. Anyone? Spanish? Spanish? Okay, great. All you have to do is click on the CC button, which stands for closed captions. So Spanish. It's kind of fun to scroll through these different languages. Someone once asked me, he said he was fluent in Icelandic, and I said, I don't even know if it's on there. I didn't know it was a language. And there it is. But let's go to Spanish. Okay.
To the look of your dog. These big pants. Well, can I show you something on it? Absolutely. Okay.
For the past several years, students in Eva Reeder's geometry class at Mountain Lake Terrace High School have faced a severe challenge at the end of the school year.
Open, inviting area.
My students are engaged in a 5-6 week project. It's a culminating project in a regular geometry class. They bring together everything that they've learned in the geometry class and they're applying it to solve a real world problem. And the problem that they have to solve is how do you design a state-of-the-art high school in the year 2050 on a particular site, and this is the site for this year. Can you leave the hills as they are? Yeah. What are you going to use it for? Oh, so you still have a bunch of paths through here? That's nice. Students are in teams of 3 or 4, and they're in a design competition for a contract to build it.
35 by 35 feet long. The back wall is 20 feet tall with 2 10-foot pillars.
At the end of the project, each team is required to submit a site plan for their
The
school,
actual area right here has 5 buildings.
a scale model of at least one room,
The front row desk will lower down to the ground.
a floor plan, and a cost estimate for construction.
Our total cost was $86,420,182.
Teams submit a written proposal and give a final oral presentation to a team of architects who volunteer their time to judge the relative merits of the proposals.
We'll build 100 yards, 300 feet.
Reeder created this rigorous project when she realized that her students weren't able to apply what they were studying in class.
It became immediately apparent to me as a teacher that talking to kids didn't cause them to really deeply learn concepts. And they might learn the material, learn it so that they could spit back formulas and so on a paper and pencil test. But they weren't able to apply it in a context that was outside of that unit and outside of that worksheet or book unit.
Why not have a whole wall be glass facing the water?
It's when they can use what they learn in class to solve a problem that I know that they've learned the material.
You have doors leading to the outside classroom, so.
While students must draw on their knowledge of everything from math and English to the aesthetics of design, they also learn an invaluable lesson in teamwork.
We'll see how many we fit. We'll see how many
I'm thinking because
When we finally started the site model, there was constant little squabbling about, oh, this should go there.
just the bottom row itself just holds 1,200 people. Right?
No, the entire thing holds 400.
Oh, the entire school.
They're faced with this really complex problem that has certain constraints. And they have to figure out how to begin to make the decisions and move the process forward. And how do you do that decision making within a group? These are the things that are really maybe the most powerful learnings that come from it. The real life problem solving, communication, collaboration skills.
I did learn how to work with people that didn't think the way I did. You thought nonlinear, didn't believe in deadlines. They really think out of the box, which is not like me. I'm completely in the box kind of person. You gotta make sure you work together.
You might be able to just kind of quickly build a little model of it.
Seattle architects Mark Miller and Kirk Wise have played a key role in the design project for the past 8 years, acting as mentors, coaches, and ultimately judges of the students' work.
There's also escalators.
A hugely important piece of a really effective project is to have the audience for the student work be someone outside of the classroom. So I go out into the community and I find someone who's willing to look at their work.
Which means that you use the sunlight for daylight.
The quality of student work really does go through the ceiling because they care about these architects' opinions.
These are great ideas. You're sort of dissolving the concept of a wall. dissolving this idea of indoor-outdoor.
It felt so good to do it, and to present it to like architects really boosted up the confidence, and I really wanted to put an impact on them and show them all I got.
Hi, we're Max. We'll take you to the maximum.
In the beginning, we decided to start with the floor plans and the designs. Our school has one main building with 4 buildings on the side of it, connecting with walkways. Can you guys imagine what it would be like just walking into a room and all you see is just 3 feet of wall with brick, and then the rest windows even on top of you? That's what we have in our model right here.
The classroom is built down 20 feet, so the back wall is into the hill itself. The rest of the walls are made of glass. The 2 side walls are clear so you can look out and have no disruption with your view. The silver pad is a light projection, and the little white square is a 360-degree hologram. This hologram is your teacher. This hologram teacher can change for your subject. If you want math, you can get Miss Reader. If you want physics, you can get Einstein.
Thank you.
It's all programmed in.
Education in the year 2050 is very different from the way it was at the beginning of the century. Class sizes are smaller, school budgets are much larger, and most importantly, students are taught differently. Education has become project-based.
Spending 6 weeks on a single project at the end of the school year is a bold teaching strategy, but for Reader and her students, the gamble pays off.
My colleagues asked me, how do I possibly find time for project-based learning when there are so many concepts to cover, so much curriculum to cover, and the pressure to get students ready for high-stakes tests? And my answer to them is that applied learning or project-based learning is the most effective way to deliver information, and it's the most effective way for students to understand concepts. Once they have learned a skill by having to use it, it's theirs. You don't need to cram for it on the test. It's a way of learning information that works.
You guys, if everybody wants to direct their attention that way, you will see the Rainier Tower.
On the final day of the class architecture project, Ever Reader's students went on a field trip to check out some of Seattle's landmark structures.
The center of gravity for that building is a giant concrete-based below the building.
But the most eagerly anticipated stop on the trip was a visit to the architectural firm of Wise Miller.
Good morning, glad you could make it. These are sketches that we did for the high school.
The students were eager to learn about the work of these 2 prominent Seattle architects, but they were also anxious to find out what grades they were going to get from them on this, the final day of assessment.
And then they had the library rotating, and they made a point of saying that it needed to be larger.
The architect's judgment counts for 40% of a student's final grade for the project. It's just part of the sophisticated rubric that Reader has refined over the years.
I have to come up with ways to assess those products and performances. So I look at the site plan, I look at the perspective drawing, I read the proposal, and I have a scoring guide developed for each one of those. But I think that the most powerful assessment for this project is that provided by the architects.
You will remember this activity your whole lives, and it will make a difference. What you've done is very good, and we want to recognize the best of the best.
With the moment of truth at hand, students were able to taste the thrill of winning or the agony of losing a contract.
We have 3 groups that we want to recognize: ADP, SK, and Max. Can you come up?
This was also a time to celebrate the diverse inspirations and surprising talents that emerged during the course of the project.
You have a level of comfort as you presented your work, and when you know your work and you know what you're saying and you believe it, it comes through. And so we wanted your building because you were doing a good job in your presentation. We're ready for Best Architecture. Best Architecture category goes to Yin Yang. Your architectural solution was just very, it's almost animate.
Hearing the architect say something like, this is a building I'd like to work together with you on. You can't duplicate that experience in a classroom.
But we really liked those arms that reached down the hillside, and we could see the classroom learning going indoor and outdoor.
It's so powerful for the students because they have someone who can deeply appreciate what it is they've struggled with and gone through. And someone who can just really let them know what a fabulous job they've done.
Are we ready for the final? Best overall project for this year. I have to tell you that the winner was won by 1 point. The winner this year goes to SK. Come on up.
To hear someone honoring their ideas, that gives me chills.
Their presentation was very strong. Their educational concept was just wonderful.
All of the little details of the hassle of arranging field trips and making all this come together, it's just completely worth it.
For more information on what works and
Great. So, first of all, how were the captions? Those of you who speak Spanish, what did you think? Ah. So, percentage-wise, would you say it was like 95%, 90%? Yeah, good. What's amazing about these tools is they get better and better. The way in which Google manages how they're doing that translation, these different languages, they're just continually improving it. When I first started using it, and people would say, especially foreign language teachers would say, you know, Google Translate is not that great. It might be 70%, but they could tell that the grammar, the vocabulary wasn't quite accurate, but it's gotten a lot better and just will continue to get better from there. So this is a great example of many of the edges that I talk about. And certainly that co-teaching edge, but also a new approach to curriculum and assessment. If you saw the way in which that rubric was used, the points were allotted, the collaboration around working together in teams. So the use of technology, the computer-aided design as well. And you saw one of the winning teams was exactly that team where the young boy, Joe, talked about differences in how they worked together. He said he was completely inside the box, whereas the others were outside the box. So they were able to find a way to work together and do quite well. And that's an important skill. We're learning that some of these skills of collaboration and teamwork, resolving conflict when you're working on a project, these are as valuable as anything else when you come into the workplace. If you look at what employers are saying, they want those sorts of skills. They want kids who've had practice in that. Sometimes they say, we are hiring for attitude because we can train for skill. The skill levels change, there's new methods, they can train you up on that, but that temperament, that mindset about the ability to communicate, work together well with others, that's a very valuable skill that they want you coming in with. So we're trying to see more of that through project-based learning and these sorts of projects. We've got some great examples of projects on our website, and often when you talk about the quality and depth of projects, these kids are doing something beyond what you would have thought they could do at the 10th grade, designing schools of the future using computer-aided design. Would you believe that high school students can design a hybrid vehicle? That is something you would have thought, oh, maybe you have to be a professional automotive engineer to do. But when they are mentored by this gentleman right here, who is also like those architects working with the teachers, they can do this kind of work. This is a high school in West Philly, which you may know is one of the toughest neighborhoods in Philly. And if you looked at those kids, I don't know if you can imagine they can do this work, but they not only did this work, they won competitions. It's a carbon fiber body. It can run 55 miles per gallon using biofuel. It's a hybrid vehicle. And it looks great too. In the story, the first thing that the kids say when they're learning about hybrid vehicles is, Well, okay, so there's the Prius. We don't want to design a car that looks like the Prius. That's a car that our parents might be seen driving around in. That's not a car we would like to drive. So you'll see it has a lot of design aspects. It's a shiny red sports car. It looks great. Not only did these high school students win a competition, but they competed against college students. So often in project-based learning, with the right environment, the right mentoring, these kids can do work that's several grade levels beyond. When we started doing this work, we would see 8th grade students who were studying the coral reef ecosystem. These are 8th graders in New York City, and they were doing high school level work. They were looking at the relationship between the coral reef and the atmosphere and the ozone layer, the depletion of the ozone layer through pollution, and how it was affecting the growth of these small little single-celled organisms in the coral reef, which is, as you know, environmental scientists say, we should all be paying attention to the coral reef, because that is the canary in the coal mine. That will tell us how badly our environment is deteriorating, and these kids saw that connection between the organisms in the coral reef and ozone depletion. These are 8th graders. They had access to laptop computers, all sorts of other tools, but they were, through projects, doing work far beyond what you'd normally assume. So, as I've alluded to, social and emotional learning becomes very important. And this is something that has not typically been the role of schools. But on our website, you'll see a lot of content related to SEL, its value, because often in projects we are doing cooperative learning. So there are a lot of dimensions to this, but one thing, I won't show this video today because I want to reserve some time for your comments and questions. But one thing I'd like to reiterate is the research behind SEL. It's not enough for me to tell you, and maybe you'll have a sense that social emotional learning is important, but we have some of the best research showing that teaching kids to do this kind of work, to reflect on themselves, to be able to communicate well about things that come up in school, out of school, on the playground, starting with our youngest kindergarten kids all the way through high school. The research shows that on average, kids do much better on the tests, far beyond just about anything else we've tried to change curriculum, to provide technology. If we really wanted to increase test scores, we'd do this. So if you go to our web content at Edutopia and just type in SEL, you'll find it. You can also find this research described by an organization called the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It's just casel.org. So we're very much trying to help policymakers understand this, to make sure there's support and resources to do this. And in Illinois, in particular, where CASEL is located, they've done a lot of work with the state legislature, and they've got SEL standards in the curriculum passed by the state. So not only are they working on math standards and reading standards for the Common Core, they're working on SEL standards. I wanted to mention this project. It's called ConnectEd, ConnectEd California. This is a project funded by the Irvine Foundation in California. I know there are a couple of large foundations in this state that we're discussing this project with. When you think about high school, and you think about all the opportunities for learning now, high school is a time when we'd like to expose more students to the world of work. It's been said that the single most frequently asked question in high school is, why do I need to know this? How does this apply to anything that I might use for my own personal hobbies or for a career? So the Irvine Foundation was looking around California, looking around the country, because we have a very high high school dropout rate in California. They're looking for a new model for California high schools. And different places had different pieces of it, but they said nothing really comprehensive exists. So we're going to have to invent it. And they funded this organization, a new organization called ConnectEd, to actually do this work. And it started about 7 years ago. By now they put more than $30 million into this work. And now it's really starting to catch hold. ConnectEd involves redesigning courses so that into pathways, so that they identified 6 or 7 major pathways of importance to California. And they're probably the same pathways here in the state of Washington. They involve healthcare. We know we need a much better educated workforce in healthcare. We know that we're going to need more in finance, in technology, in entertainment. Entertainment's a huge industry in California. I'm sure it is at least here as well. We need more people who understand the digital arts and how to use technology to work at Lucasfilm or to work at Disney. And we don't see that happening in the high schools yet. Only until people get to college, they might get an experience with the digital arts. Let's start that earlier. So there are 4 or 5 of these major law as well, environmental studies as well. So redesign courses to be much more modern, then also experience in the workplace. In this project, as freshmen, they start to make the typical field trips out to workplaces. As sophomores and juniors, they begin to shadow professionals, walking around the hospital, learning what happens in the hospital, learning to apply what they're learning in biology class in the high school. And then the senior year, they actually do workplace internships. They actually work and contribute to what's going on in the workplace, and that sets them on a path. And even if they don't elect that path during their college years, they've had a lot of experience with the workplace, how it works, how you work together in teams, how you need to be able to communicate well. They're beginning to understand the value of these skills. So I think I've got time to show you one more piece. Okay. I mentioned this idea of getting more kids to 4th grade reading level, and how up until now we've had the book, and kids have been reading the book, and some kids do well with that, and a lot of kids don't. Now we have, through these digital media experiences, ways in which the text can talk back to you. You've seen this. You've got a piece of text, it can be read to you. Some of these new platforms, when you encounter a word that you don't know, you click on it, it pops up a little clue. It can pop up a picture. If you don't know what the word volcano is, and you're 7 years old, you click on it, it'll pop up a picture. It can pronounce that word for you. It can pronounce that word in several languages for you. So it makes the text much more interactive and much more intelligent. There are systems now, some are published by Scholastic, where if you're 7 years old and you're reading well at the 2nd grade, it can level up the text to the 3rd grade. It can give you more challenging text. So it makes the text much more intelligent in how it operates. I want to show you just one example of how these digital tools are increasing reading levels of kids, especially for English language learners. This comes from San Diego, and it's a project called iRead. And in this project, they use the iPod, not the iPad, the iPod, starting 4 or 5 years ago. One of the things they do is to attach a microphone to the iPod. It turns the iPod into an audio recording device. So the kids speak into the microphone, it records what they're reading, and they're usually reading text, and then what happens is the recording of their audio becomes a platform for them to listen to themselves. They can listen to each other, they can share their readings, and their parents can listen to their own kids' reading. They can listen to what actually happened during the school day. So the iPod as a recording device makes reading public. It's no longer a private thing that you struggle with the words on the page. You get better and better at it, and part of that is listening to yourself read. All these readings go into an iTunes playlist. So it's public, and the kids, the teachers, the parents can all listen to what's going on there. So I just want to show you a clip of this project as an interesting way of capturing performance through recording.
You know, it's a daily tool for them. It's in a sense replaced a lot of the almost more high-dollar things we've had to buy. It's their dictionary, it's their encyclopedia, it's their recording device, it's in a lot of cases their pencil and paper now.
Using one of our standards is to use the tools, learning how to use tools to help us learn, so it's a dictionary. Okay, so the iPod is becoming more of one of those resources, an encyclopedia, a dictionary, a writing tool, a speaking tool, looking up information. It's just everything beyond what I could have imagined that I would be doing when I first started teaching.
And I think as far as a tool goes, the kids think this is my thing. This is my generation's thing, having an iPod Touch, and I'm using it to become a better reader and a better student.
We've been raising the green generation now. They're very in tune with being ecologically minded and whatnot, so that now they like the fact that we're not wasting paper and things anymore. We're doing things on a blog or on a wiki, and there's no waste there. And yet, I can still keep record of it. They can still have a record of it. It's there. It's just changed things so much. I look at it on a daily basis, and I think maybe it's just really doing great things, because there's no big bomb that goes off that suddenly every kid is on grade level and every kid is engaged, but they certainly are more engaged and more things are happening. There's little bits and pieces everywhere throughout the day where you see the light going off, and I know that this tool has helped to do that.
The students are really engaging more with the literature, with the story, with the author. And I've had students that are eager to stay after school to re-record their voice because they weren't happy with the way things turned out. So they're practicing their reading, they're practicing their fluency. One student who came to me, he was reading at the 2nd grade reading level, and I just tested him, he's reading at a 7th grade reading level. And that's the student that was so eager to stay after school so much. So I can't tell you how it's changed. I can't really explain exactly how it's changed everything, except that the students are motivated, they're so excited to be using iPods, and they're excited to learn without me having to say, okay, you have to stay after school and do this. So I'm just very, very pleased.
We have such a high percentage of second language learners that and we don't realize how much the teacher is talking all day and how little time the students are getting for oral language practice until we put them on an iPod or GarageBand or something where they're recording their voice, and they just, you can really tell they need more practice. Oral language is so important, and they're just not getting enough of it in the school day.
There's less of me talking and more of them doing. To be able then to listen to themselves and their own take on this, the buy-in in terms of learning in my classroom has been tremendous. And so I got excited and kind of extended that to a bunch of areas, to doing math facts, to doing reading strategies with leveled readers, and the whole thing, they can't wait. And the iPods are actually going out 3 times a day now. And we use the little quiet rooms attached to our classroom for it. And they take out the iPod, they read story summaries, they do fluency drills, and they listen to themselves. And here's what I've noticed. I've had kids say to me, I never heard myself before. Now I understand when someone tells me my pace is too fast. Or I understand when I'm not pronouncing the word right, because as I listen to it and I'm reading it back, I go, oh, wait a minute, that was wrong. And they said, and the ability to be able to then erase a bad recording and send it to the trash can and do it over 2 or 3 times until you're happy with it, and then save that one, has empowered them. They're responsible much more for their own learning. It's not so much just directed by me.
One of the things I've enjoyed most about iRead is being a part of this professional learning community, because this is something I'm really excited about learning for myself. Recently, PLCs have been the popular thing, and oftentimes we're given some contrived situation where we have to come together as a community and respond. This is a situation that I'm hungry to learn about.
So that gives you a sense of the project. Some of these educators talk about this use of the iPod as the missing mirror in language learning. This is what technology was meant to do: record and playback. It's as simple as that. That's what these cameras can do. That's what the audio device can do, to record our performance and play it back. We haven't had this way of learning about language before. And this is, as you can tell, very powerful. The students love it. That's part of what's at work here, is the engagement of the students with their own personal devices. And when you think about it, recording and playing back is used in a lot of areas. It's used in the arts. Dancers do that. They record their performance and they play back and analyze. It's used in sports. I guarantee you that your Seahawks are right now sitting in a hotel room watching video of the Broncos. and themselves. In last Super Bowl, it was last year or the year before, there was a play. And a pass was intercepted in the fourth quarter. It was a very key play. And afterwards, that defensive back, they asked him, how did you know where the ball was going to go? How did you know where to be in that play? He said, when they lined up and we lined up, I had seen this formation before on tape. I knew exactly what the quarterback was going to do, and that was the decisive play in the game. And maybe some of the players after this Super Bowl will comment on that. They're preparing by watching technology, recording, and playing back the opposing team. So let's bring that to education. Let's find ways of using technology to record performance and get better and better at it. And as some of the students say, and some of the teachers say, when you're learning a language, it could be English, it could be any language, when you're learning it, you don't get a chance to hear yourself speaking it. So that's a key thing, and it's a nice use of very inexpensive technology. Well, let me try to wrap up and get to some of your comments and questions. I can't help but wanting to show you, when it comes to technology, a whole series of, and these will be on the stream, and I'm glad to provide these slides to you, but ways in which the internet has totally changed what we can do in the classroom. This is a project where kids can actually look at insects under a scanning electron microscope. Imagine when you were 8 years old to have this experience of real science. You find insects, you send them, in this case, to the University of Illinois, and your teachers can schedule time for you to talk with scientists there, experts on insects. They'll tell you about your insects that you actually caught, and then you could look at them under a scanning electron microscope. One of the most exciting areas funded by the National Science Foundation is putting scientific instruments online. Microscopes, telescopes, so that any kid anywhere, any class anywhere with access to the internet can have that experience of using a real telescope or microscope. And not just a real one, but an incredibly powerful one. This is a project we also have in California. It's called School to Home. It's a laptop program. The reason I like this program is because it also uses language translation for students and their parents. The parents are able to use Google Translate to take the school assignments and see them in Spanish or Vietnamese. They're able to then also take their language and have that translated through Google Translate to the school. So for the first time, the parents are involved in learning about what's going on at the school in their own language. We haven't had a way of doing this before, but now if you look at this film at School to Home, you'll see the parents saying this in Spanish, that for the first time, I'm able to become a partner in my child's learning. It's very powerful. You can actually do mapping of species on the internet. Your students, and if you go to this website called Journey North, you will see students in the state of Washington who observed the flight of the monarch butterfly as it goes from Canada down to Mexico and back up again. You log the location of your sighting, you put it up on the website, and you'll see the map. So please take a look at that. Again, it's real science and collaborative science. You'll see all the observations done by students around these different states and countries. So you're participating in real science. We made a film about it, and I just love the look on that student's face. That's the look you want for every student, isn't it? That's why documentary films are powerful. Seeing the butterfly emerge from the chrysalis. I'll close on this one because it's one of my favorites, and it's the Art Project by Google. You know about Google Street View, right? You've all typed in your address, and Street View sends you that picture. Some of you are actually typing it in to see if your automobile is in the driveway when the time that that satellite went by. So Google is doing a number of very interesting projects, and they've taken that Street View technology with those cameras, and instead of putting them on cars and driving them up and down streets, they put them on bicycles and rode them up and down the galleries of the world's greatest art museums. So your students can have this experience, and there's just a listing of them from New York City and Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian, to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. St. Petersburg, oh my gosh, the State Hermitage museum. I will never get a chance to go there, but I've had that experience. As you're walking down those hallways and you go up to a work of art, you begin to hear the curator telling you about it. You can then act as a curator of your own art collection. There's a way in which you can do that online, and you can begin to put together your own collection of your favorite works of art from around the world. Again, we haven't had a way to do this with students, and now we do. So let me pause there because it's getting close to, we have about 10 or 15 minutes maybe for questions and comments, but I've appreciated so much my time here and look forward to hearing your comments and hopefully hearing about how you're creating 21st Century College of Education and schools here in Western Washington. So thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for coming in today. My question is, with this new technology, we watched that video with the students with all their personal iPods recording their reading, and all the footage was just of students looking down at these little screens. And what I'm wondering is, how do you think that's affecting their social skills when they're no longer getting help from their parents on their reading or getting help from teachers or their peers? They aren't looking at people in the eyes and talking to real people and looking around them. They're looking down at a little screen. I'm just curious how you think that's affecting social skills for the children growing up.
Yeah, actually in that project they are getting help from their parents and teachers, and because the reading is made public and parents can listen to their kids read, and the same thing for teachers, they are actually discussing their performance in the readings with their teachers. But this is clearly a big problem, screen time, and how students are just, you're right, staring down at their screens. I mentioned that survey that just came out about how many kids are using screens at least 7 hours a day on average. So it's become a real issue, and I think it's one of the most important things we need to do in schools is to teach responsible use of digital media. Some school districts, again, in recent years have sort of banned a lot of use of cell phones. There are films of high school students walking into their high schools and putting their cell phones into a box, and they don't get access to it until the end of the day. I think more districts are now recognizing that it's part of our job as educators to teach this responsible use of technology. So you know it, here in college classrooms, you don't spend time talking on your cell phones. You're focusing your attention on the activity in the classroom or in the laboratory. So teaching that to kids starting at an early age is very important, because without that, I can't tell you how many times I've been at dinner with young people, and you're right, they're just playing Candy Crush on their iPods. So, but again, I believe as educators we should believe that these skills can be taught, and we should take that on. It's an important thing as far as how kids spend their time.
Thank you for bringing it over here. Thank you very much for the presentation. One of the questions that comes to my mind is that this tremendous accessibility for students for all sorts of educational experiences. How do you see this impacting, say, the homeschool movement?
So, I think there's a whole larger movement happening, and I didn't get much of a chance to talk about it, where because these educational experiences are available to anyone, anywhere, in their homes, in home schools, in their schools, after school. We talked a little bit earlier about the value of summer and providing more of these learning experiences during the long summer vacation that we have here in this country. There are beginning to be parents who are really understanding what is now available, and homeschoolers and their parents have been some of the earliest adopters of technology. They're the ones who love the fact that there are online courses, that their kids can take courses from any number of online course providers. So I think you might see as parents begin to look at their school district, what can happen in that school, what they can provide at home. They're both going to want to demand more of the school district. I think parents have enormous power and haven't actually grasped that in this public conversation. Starting from the time their kids are born till for the first 5 years, parents have enormous impact on their kids' learning, probably more impact than teachers can have during the K-12 years. Those first 5 years of life and how parents talk to their kids, the experiences they provide, the fact that someone was mentioning earlier, 1-year-olds, 18-month-olds can begin to use the iPad to access content. So it's part of that movement. We're providing experiences earlier. Kids are learning earlier. Parents are beginning to understand this. So it may well impact more parents saying, I think I can do more with this. But hopefully more of them will also put pressure on school districts to say, we want to support this. We want to provide, we'll vote for tax referendums to provide technology to schools. I continue to believe in public schools. That my daughter went to a public school, elementary school, and it was a very important experience for her to be in a public school with many different kinds of kids and families. It was good for us as a family, good for her as a student. They were mainstreaming kids with Down syndrome into her 4th grade classroom. So these are things that are very hard for homeschoolers to participate in, but that's why public education continues to be the best way to lift our society.
So I have a question on what's inhibiting, in your opinion, the access or the equitable access to technologies in schools. Specifically, I got to teach in Philadelphia, where World's Communication Charter School, every student had an iPad, and you can see that learning. And down the street, Palumbo High School had no learning or no technology within their classrooms. Not no learning, I apologize. And then also, speaking of Philadelphia, what kind of work and what does collaboration look like between you and the Duckworth Lab or people that are looking at important things like grit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, I think you're referencing Angela Duckworth, right? Yeah. And her TED Talk, right? Is it TED Talk? Well, our role, and we should tell you that this is, you'd have to search on Angela Duckworth to see her, and she just received a MacArthur Fellowship for her work on grit and resilience, and again, a great talk about how these factors are more important for the long-term success of young people as they grow into adults than just about anything else. We're learning as educators that these non-cognitive factors, that just shows you how little attention we've paid to it. We call it by non-cognitive. We don't really have a good label for it. But if you want to call it grit, resilience, social-emotional learning, that category of learning is as important and maybe more important than trying to focus just on the delivery of information. So we often, as you see from our website, have a lot of content about SEL, and we will link to the work that's going on there. We mainly are a media production group, a web production group, so we're just trying to provide ideas, success stories for people to learn from. We're not so great at actually offering professional development. That's not really our skill set. But there are many educators, if you look at the Edutopia website, who are doing this work. So I'm sure they're citing Angela Duckworth's work as well. It's very important and fairly recent. And she's a great spokesperson for this work.
Hi. So I am really excited about your project, especially like bringing in more technology and whatnot, because I'm a big user of the internet. I'm one of those 7 to 10 hour people. Like Nick was saying, this can also bring up economic differences, and so I'm wondering, how do you bring education into like very disadvantaged communities outside of the institution, and also like how are you going to address how it's going to alienate students at times who aren't able to access these resources? Yes. And how do you propose like bridging that gap, or if you have any inkling of how to even begin to address that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're at the point, as I mentioned, where we should be providing this technology to every student. It should be part of the public education budget. And in California, we're making that shift. I wish more governors would call for this. Say, look, there's a better way of doing this, and we're going to stop buying textbooks. If you look at textbooks and analyze their content, most people would agree that this is, how to put it, a superficial at best, but at worst, not a correct rendition of what science is about, what history is about, because it's hard to put as much as you want students to know within 400 pages. So we're at the point where we can do that, and many districts are beginning to make that transition. So during this decade, we will make that transition, and it will be a part of the budget. Just as we purchase textbooks, one textbook for every student, we'll be purchasing these devices for every student. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but again, the economics are arguing for it. You look at the power of devices and how we've gotten to the point. We have a very powerful device for the cost of a textbook. More and more districts, just on economic, financial basis alone, will be providing this. It's too bad that you're not a 10-year-old anymore, but for your siblings and for the kids coming through, we want to provide this.
Well, on that note, I want to ask you to join me in giving a big round of applause.
Thank you.